Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. There we go. I am your host, the Low Runner. We are covering Season 3, Episode 12, the game's Ponies Play, which is the episode in which we have the main six go to the Crystal Empire city-state in order to put on a show for Miss Harshwinny in order to host the Equestria Games within the Crystal Empire. They comically mistake the person who was actually involved, and as a direct consequence, shenanigans happen. But then they actually do get it, so, it works out in the end. Am I live? Testing. Hello. There's nobody here. Everything's burning. Oh, there's Savacom. I shared your picture earlier. So, before I go any further, I just want to say, audio issues. I'm curious, just as kind of a poll, how many of you had audio issues on this episode? I did, obviously. I am, and this is important, which version of the episode are you watching? I'm watching from Amazon. I own all the episodes on Amazon. I know that it's also a problem on Netflix. I've actually done research onto this, and near as I can tell, the version that was digitally distributed just has this issue. It's echoey. It sounds like it's been recorded through a tube or whatever. And I can even tell you the effect that it's happening on it, but I'm not sure why this happened. It's so strange. Now, according to Shikor, if you put it on 5.1 audio, it actually fixes it rather than 2.0 audio. But yeah, it's very strange. I'm not sure how they managed to screw this up. The second thing I want to mention is you're probably wondering why we're covering Season 3, Episode 12 before we cover Season 3, Episode 7. It's because this episode, in my opinion... So, okay, when these episodes actually went live, they actually did see Episode 8 and then Episode 12 right next to each other. But they did it in that order, which in my opinion is wrong. You should do this episode first and then the other episode. And I want to give my evidence for that. So first of all, obviously, these are connected episodes. I'll talk more about that concept in a second. But this episode teases the other one, whereas the other episode concludes this. In short, this episode kind of lays the seeds for the other episode and just leaves you going, okay. Like, if you didn't know they were connected, the teaser wouldn't look like it's connected at all. It's like, oh, hey, we need to go off. He's going to be able to handle the ponies, right? Yeah, sure. And then, typical thing. And it might as well not be connected. Until you get to the very end, and all of a sudden, out of nowhere, there's this emerald, which is just tossed at the luggage, which is just, huh? And nothing comes of it. It's just, there's this emerald there, which is strange. And then the camera pans down in the train, and you see Spike and the Cutie Mark Crusaders there. And then the episode ends. In other words, this episode serves as an effective teaser for the other one, whereas the other episode doesn't do anything to set up this one. That's why I think this is the correct order to do it, and that's what the order in which we are doing it. So, just wanted to explain the reasoning there really quick. Now, I want to talk about the idea of connected episodes, and then I want to talk about a few other things, and cadence, and then a few other things, and then I want to talk about the corrupt system. So give me a minute here, Mike. We'll get there. And they look scared for some reason, and they're hiding for some reason. What could it be? We'll find out later today. Anywho, so connected episodes. This is something that television actually does very rarely. It's an alternate form of continuity. A connected episode is an episode in which the events of it dovetail or happen at the same time as another episode. So, something that Battlestar Galactica did a few times, and I'm struggling to even come up with another example. I think Farscape did this at least once. Now, there are levels of connectivity. You can do it so that you see one side of a story and then another side of the story. That's what Battlestar Galactica did, for example. And yeah, I believe this is the only MLP episode that does this. It's a great idea that I can't believe television doesn't do more of. Because, first of all, you can do full-tier connectivity, a.k.a., things look different from this angle than from this angle, right? The shifting angle perspective, giving you a whole new appreciation of what's going on, a form of Babylon 5 effect. But even if you do this kind of little continuity, it kind of helps because this allows you to show multiple stories happening basically concurrently. While this is happening here, this is also happening here. There's a loose thread connecting the two stories of this and Just for Sidekicks, but for the most part, they aren't directly connected other than the fact that they are happening at the same time. But that's fine, because it does still add a little bit more to the thing. And this goes to Shikor's point. Shikor says that requires more planning. Yes and no. If you're going to do a full-tiered connectivity episode, then yes, absolutely. That's going to require a lot more planning. But you can still do something like these episodes do, which requires very little additional planning. All you have to know is 2 episodes in advance. That's it. And again, remember, these are barely connected. In fact, there are exactly 3 scenes of connection in this episode. The teaser, which might as well just be a teaser, the emerald, which is nice setup, and the pan down of the train. That's it. And yeah, since a lot of TV shows tend to make seasons in one block, this wouldn't really require an additional extra amount of work. Not really. So in short, this is a great idea that I loved, and I wish they would do more of it, and of course they won't. If I ever actually get started into making television, someday, after when I'm making games and books and television shows, I actually plan to do this kind of thing quite a bit. Because I'm a weirdo like that. Anywho, so that's connectivity. Moving on. You get to the Crystal Empire. Lots of ponies are fully crystallized, which is interesting. It kind of shows how energetic, though, they are. Because remember, they aren't crystallized normally, or at least that's how it was showcased. And we see this great bit where Rainbow Dash walks up and is like, there's this little kid running around. And the little kid's like, hey, and yes, no, the crushing, horrible disappointment. And the kid's like, oh. And then Rainbow's like, that's the face I don't want to see right there. And it's just, Rainbow, chill a little bit. Just a little bit. Nice little tidbit. That is in the end of the episode. Obviously, the games are announced and they win. It's going to be Hellstar the Crystal Empire, which will happen in season 4, by the way. In fact, I think we're having a total of 3 or 4 episodes that will cover these events when we get to season 4. But we'll get there when we get there. The relevant point for right now is that the kid actually shows up. Like Rainbow Dash is like, yay, and actually is holding up the kid. The end. Nice little connection there. Sunshine, sunshine, ladybug's awake. They're still doing that. In fact, there's 2 significant continuity points in this, so I'm going to go and up the continuity counter. Oh, excuse me, 3 continuity points. Either that or I'm just falling behind at this point. It's getting harder and harder to update the local stuff and the HUD stuff at the same time. I'm having the trouble with the reviews, too. So, before I talk about the politics, because I do have politics to talk about, because of course I do, it's My Little Pony. Why wouldn't I be talking about politics? I want to talk about 2 other things really quick. First, as I mentioned, I don't know the exact timing, but from what I'm able to tell from my very brief research that I do while watching the episode, it seems like the season 3... So season 3 was supposed to be it. They signed on for 3 seasons. They figured season 3 would be the end. This is why season 3 is so short, and why several of the episodes tend to be in a more conclusory kind of a tone. Rainbow Dash joins the Wonderbolts, and, Discord gets reformed, and blah, 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 right? Here's the thing. Near as I can tell, because of the nature of how television works, the time at which they found out they would be going past Season 3 was before they started work on Season 3. I'm still saying that wrong. Is before they started production on Season 3. There we go. Because the storyboarding and the general loose design of Season 3 had already been designed. Then they found out it was going to keep going. Because television isn't just made, there's steps and layers of production and work and all that stuff. So they couldn't really rewrite anything, but they could kind of be like, okay, well, let's start thinking going forward now that we're actively at this point of knowing there's going to be a season 4. Which I mention as well because this is one of the reasons why the Equestria Games things has multiple episodes in season 4. This was originally just supposed to be kind of a one-off thing. So, shrug. This is all the Apple Family Reunion is another good example of this. This will just keep showing up in Season 3. That's the main reason I bring it up. There's a lot of things that kind of look like Season 3 would be the final season. A lot of, like I said, conclusive episodes, which just kind of wrap things up a little bit before things continue. We'll see how much this affects things going forwards. Magical Mystery Cure, let's leave that for later. Let's leave that one for later, shall we? Anyways, next thing I want to talk about is this episode's premise is stupid. Don't mistake me, I enjoy this episode well enough. It took, God, probably a good 10 minutes for me to get used to the audio issues, but other than that, I do actually enjoy this episode. But the premise is really dumb. As I was going through, I just kept sitting there and counting out the different ways in which they could have found out earlier that she's actually not Miss Harshwinny, but she's instead Miss Peachbottom, which, by the way, they don't even mention her name in the entire episode. Her name is Miss Peachbottom. That's according to Hulu, I believe, because and the original script documents. There's just so many ways they could have solved this and figured out who she really is, and should have, like her cutie mark, or her demeanor, or her attitude, or anything that was being presented whatsoever, like, say, I don't know, a basic introduction. And this is the kind of the point. This is why I call this actually stupid. Savicom says, was it stupid in character? Yes. It's not that hard to say, hi, my name's such and such. What's yours? Or, hello, we're the welcoming committee for you, Miss Harshwinny. Most people say their other names, especially at initial introductions. This would have been really easy to smooth out early on, and that's why I call it dumb. Now, you notice I'm grinning a bit. It's because I do like this episode, and in fact, this episode made me laugh like 5 or 6 times, which I think is actually a record going forward for just general humor. So it's a funny episode, and I'm with it. But somehow this episode did actually turn out to be good, despite the fact that its premise is stupid, so the cloud effect. I'm going to go ahead and mention one last thing before we talk about the politics. So if you want to start typing here, Mike, now's probably the time. Right? I started doing that after I saw this episode for the first time, because I was actually in a fairly large amount of stress at that particular point in my life. And it's funny because the actual action doesn't mean anything, except for the fact that it's a pause. You have to physically stop, adjust your moment, adjust your posture, take in the breath, and then do the gesture. And nowadays, I mentally think of it as taking something and just throwing it away. Yeah, it gives you a moment to just kind of take a pause and refresh yourself and let your brain just kind of think things out. I've talked so many times about how pausing is such an important key and critical tool for how we work as human beings. And, it helps to cognate, it helps to deal with crises, it helps to get rid of anger, all sorts of horrible things like that. I'm not even going to look at my Discord because Low Reloaded doesn't matter. Now, I'm kidding, I'll look at it later. But I have found that to be a legitimately effective tool for combating stress, which I like, because I think someone actually did that before they introduced that into the episode, and then they just used their experience into the episode. Now, he doesn't give a damn. He doesn't like good television, Savicom. He watches Discovery. So, okay, let's go ahead and finally talk about the thing. So obviously this is based off of the Olympics. The Olympics is an astonishingly corrupt system in real life. It's actually kind of funny. Because, on the one hand, it makes perfect sense why it's so corrupt. But on the other hand, there's no way to combat it without just canceling the event. That's the really weird thing here. Because, okay, let's say that there's a planet, and let's say this planet has a yearly sports event where everyone gets together to sports, okay, cool. And they go compete, and there's blah, 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 blah. Now, they have to choose a location to do it in. So that location has to have setup. They have to have housing, they have to have food, they have to be able to deal with the byproduct and waste of large groups of people in a large area at one time, and they have to have the actual physical space to hold them, the stadium or whatever, right? All of these things are things that are relevant and significant when it comes to doing this kind of event. And I'm saying this at such a bare bones level because I'm trying to make a point. Even if you eject hundreds of years of human history and backing and all this fun stuff, what we have here is a precedent for massive cultural and economic impact with regards to this event happening here. Because people like sports. I know it's shocking to think that way, but people like sports and people like competing. And so as a direct consequence, people are going to be into that. People are going to be rooting for their side or their person or wanting to get as many medals as they can or whatever, right? I mean, this sounds like such a duh thing to say, but surely you've heard of rooting for the home team. Surely you've heard of, rooting for your team despite how badly they're doing. Surely you've heard of, that traitor, they finally swapped teams. Right? I mean, this is such a huge, massive cultural thing. It goes back literally into the millennia range in human history. Frickin' Besaid Orox, man. Sorry. Anyways, point being, this is the kind of thing that even if we lived in Star Trek on Earth, specifically on Earth, because Earth on Star Trek is different than the rest of Star Trek, there would still be a massive cultural impact from doing this, right? They're still competitive. The humanity and the other races, the core races on Earth, Paradise Land, they're still competitive. They still struggle. They still try to do stuff. There would still be a big impact. That's if you're ignoring the existence of the necessity of the economics involved, which brings me to the economic side of things. Because you have just brought a large amount of people into an area who are now spending a large amount of money in a short period of time. There's a reason tourism is such a large thing when it comes to being an industry. Now... competition is actually good. I legitimately agree with that concept. It's just competition can go too far. But then again, duh, right? Water can go too far. Air can go too far, so duh. But I do think competition is a good thing. Interesting. Other lore. What were you discussing it in context of? So yeah, I'm just talking this in a total vacuum. Now we take it in the context of My Little Pony. The Crystal Empire has only recently been reintroduced to the rest of the world, either because they were sealed away or because of the time thing. We already talked about that. So one way or another, this is a huge boon to them economically, which they need because their economy is literally hundreds of years out of date. And this is a big cultural boon because it's something they need for the boost in the win. You'll notice towards the end of the episode when it's announced that it's there, everyone is so excited and so happy for that fact that the freaking crystal star actually has another ignition. The happiness sets off another wave of joy throughout the rest of all of Equestria, just because of the announcement that they're getting it. Then, you add on top of that the fact that did I say star? I'm sorry. Crystal Heart. Too much Mario in the brain. Crystal Heart. Then you add on to that the fact that they need to reconnect with the rest of society. That they need to reforge the bonds that no longer exist because they've been absent for centuries. This is a huge deal, right? Damn prestige. God, I could talk about Star Trek economics for hours, and I think I have at this point. I wouldn't be surprised, Savicom. I wouldn't be surprised if you were correct. By the way, I should mention something. You notice Spike isn't here. I don't want to derail. I just want to mention really quick. You'll notice Spike isn't here. Spike the Brave and Glorious is actually a Season 4 thing. Which I mentioned because that was an idea that they didn't use whatsoever in Season 3, in the original plan. Spike the Brave and Glorious would actually become a thing in the future. Just interesting to think about. So yes, we're currently talking about the Crystal Empire and the effects of the Equestria Games and the local cultural and economic impact, because I love saying that with a straight face. I once saw someone who insinuated that the mere fact that I discuss the incidents of My Little Pony from an analytical bent, the idea that there is something to analyze here, was itself a lie. That I was pretending to be smart by pretending that there is something to analyze in My Little Pony. Now, I shouldn't have to explain how monumentally stupid of a concept that is, but I just love the fact that we're having this big, relatively in-depth discussion about politics, economics, and culture when it comes to an episode of My Little Pony. The boon that this would be to the Empire is gargantuan. And this leads to the corruption thing. Now I'm going to parallel this to real life really quick, because this episode does parallel this one aspect of real life. And that is the courting. Now I could talk a lot about how courting tends to be a corrupt thing in real life in general, but I don't want to talk about how love is a lie and everyone hates each other. Instead, what I want to talk about is how when you sit there and start courting someone to come to your thing, to do their thing here, it's kind of impossible for that not to be corrupt. This is what I started this whole discussion about, the whole politics and corruption thing. Because the moment you introduce the fact that you want them to do their thing here, but they can do it elsewhere too, you have introduced competition, first of all, and you now have desire, again, cultural and economic desire for it to happen here. So it's not just general competition, it's also competition with practical, functional application. You will have more stuff if you win, right? You're not just playing to win, you're playing for the prize as well. Again, it's kind of impossible to have that kind of a setup without having some kind of corruption and some kind of political jig-argument. Now, we don't see much of that in this episode, and I'll cover that more in a little bit. But what we hear from Ms. Harshwini is the fact that she has been going through several fake, completely plasticine, utterly scripted events that she's been going through in order to try and court her, in order to try and convince the people, convince the organization that she represents, I forget what they call it off the top of my head, in order to host the Equestria Games in their city. And she's tired of it, because of course she is. It's kind of like being one of those people who rates hotels or restaurants. It's actually, funnily enough, in real life, usually restaurant critics will try very hard to not announce that they are there to criticize your restaurant until they're there. I actually don't know if that's true anymore, now that I'm thinking about it. But that did used to be true. They just show up. Oh, I'd like this. Just to see how the service is and the people is and all that fun stuff. You try to go incognito. And it's especially worse if you're a well-known critic. But there's a reason they do that. It's specifically so they avoid the completely canned, completely polished presentation. And again, it's so understandable from both perspectives, isn't it? Because on the one hand, you really want the games to be here. There's so much tangible benefit from this. There's so much tangible and intangible benefit from this. So you really want it to happen there. So you're going to do your best, and you're going to try and make yourself look better than you are, which is, by definition, faking it, right? But on the other hand, on the other side of things, they just want to know the place that's actually going to be the best place. That's actually going to be the correct location for the games and actually going to be wrong. And they just, oh, come on, I just want something that's a little more real. For Ms. Harshwini, this is a Tuesday. Also, lol, lower loaded. This is your reminder that Raid Shadow Legends is a total pile of garbage. Anyways, give me money. Now, don't actually donate. I don't want you to. So, you could see both sides of things, and I'm just going to go ahead and lead forward with my idea here. This episode has actually always... What they offer you, other lore? This episode has always bothered me, because it felt like the wrong lesson was learned. But in truth, what they actually... What the idea here is that... Well, I hate to skip ahead of my topic, but, Harshwini hates the whole plastic forced thing, right? But what the main six went through was not plastic and forced. Oh, sure, they prepared a welcoming, 5, 6, 7, 8 thing. But after that, they were just kind of making it up as they went, right? And had no idea what they were doing. Which meant it was legit. And Miss Peachbottom, she still had a good time. So, it was a legitimate presentation that still wasn't generally positive, aka an actual good welcoming committee. Now, this is something I have come to the mentality of, to the idea of. It didn't even occur to me the first time I watched this episode, because I was just like, well, but she just... Well, what's the friggin' point? Because originally I thought, okay, so she didn't get the welcoming committee, but someone else did, and that makes it okay? It didn't occur to me that the whole point was the welcome was actually genuine. And that's the message. I think there's actually a better Aesop in this episode, and I'll cover that more in a minute. But I do think that new mentality helps sell it a little bit, which I suppose I should stop sitting here and talking about the games thing at some point and start talking about the rest of the episode. So let's talk about the rest of the episode, shall we? First of all, Miss Peachbottom is claustrophobic. Now, if you don't get why I'm smiling so much, she's a Mustang. Now, if you still don't get it, Mustangs in real life actually do have claustrophobia. They need to be out and about. They need to run. They will get nervous and uncertain, and they'll just start to screw themselves over because if they're in tight, contained areas. It's actually a problem when transporting them. That was a nice touch. She, in case you think I'm making it up, she calls herself a wild Mustang, and she is from Mustangia. So, yeah, that is actually a thing that's happened, Shikor. I just thought that was a nice little touch there. And of course, her being a Mustang helps to sell how much of an Earth pony she is. Earth ponies are obviously stronger and more durable and blah, blah, blah than other ponies. But Miss Peachbottom is really strong and really fast. You know, she outraces everyone else when everyone else is doing their laps to set up for the games. And just smashes through the hurdles like they're not even there. And Rainbow Dash has trouble catching up with her originally. Which, again, makes sense if she's a Mustang, right? So, credit to detail. Credit to detail. Meanwhile, Miss Harshwinny is getting your exactly typical bad day. And I do mean the copy-paste, word-for-word bad day thing. Because if you're ever having a bad day in fiction, what's going to happen is someone's going to run through a puddle and splash it on your face. That's going to prove that you're having a bad day right there. You know, honestly, I don't actually remember Savacom. They do answer that question later, though, in Season 4. So we'll cover that there. I'm pretty sure they do categories just like we do in real life. Like, I mean, it's not like a boxer who is 240 pounds is going to fight a boxer who's 120 pounds, unless you're playing Punch-Out. Anyways. Yeah, there's Griffins there. Lots of people there. We will cover the games when we get there. Don't worry. It's a Season 4 thing. It's a Season 4 thing, like I said. Really, Sierra Mike? I've actually never had a puddle splashed to me except by my niece, of course, which I think is more like in the best day category rather than the worst day category. Meanwhile, oh god, I love that song so much. I cannot wait to talk about that episode. I think that's the beginning of Season 4 or 5 when we will finally cover that amazing episode. I use that quote out of it just in life now, other lore. You can't have a nightmare if you never dream. Anywho, so yeah, the Pinkie Pie is terrible at her job in every possible way. I made a note in my notes here that it was weird how nothing is labeled inside the castle. Then I started thinking about that. Is that true in real life castles? I actually don't know if that's true in real life castles. But yeah, it started occurring to me like, well, I mean, why would they be labeled? You know which room is which, right? Yeah, people live there. So, I mean, you don't label your bedroom, do you? I mean, it's a little different, but it just got me thinking. Like, okay, to use an example, I know World of Warcraft's geography like the back of my hand. I could probably navigate you blind through World of Warcraft right now to wherever you want to go from anywhere in the entire game. The reason I could do that is because I've played that game for 15 years. I'm extremely used to it. And so if you live in a castle for 15 years, you probably know where you're going and where things are. Ergo, nothing's labeled, right? So yeah, it actually does make a weird amount of sense. So I guess I just have to call myself an idiot on this one, which I only do every day, so. From Desolus to Eastern Plaguelands. Which side and which exact spot? I'm not going to sit here and prove my point, but I could actually make you do that. So let's see. What's the best route to go there? Because if you're Horde, you want to go this way. If you're Alliance, you want to go this way or this way. I guess the Eastern route would work better if you're Alliance. But maybe the northern route? Because from Desolus, you can go north into Stone Talon Peaks, or you can go south into Faralos. And I think I've already proven my point. Let's move on. I like how Shining Armor is the one who finally mentions something that gets them to realize she's not it. I also love the fact that she is just utterly smitten with Shining Armor, getting the princely treatment. But what I love most of all is that Pinkie Pie actually made me laugh. No! I mean, yes! That got a real laugh out of me. So, actually, it's Old Ponish. They say that in the episode. It's called Old Ponish Savicom. That'll come up in the future. Pinkie Pie almost always is not funny for me. It is quite the rarity, no pun intended, that Pinkie Pie actually makes me laugh. So, that's actually basically everything. I've already mentioned the other stuff I was going to mention. The fake Aesop, the phony baloney thing, the heart exploding, the crystal heart exploding with energy, blah, blah, blah. But I want to mention one last thing, and that's the real Aesop of this episode, in my opinion. And I'm going to go ahead and show the real Aesop to you really quick. I think that's the real Aesop of the episode. From what I have seen, this was supposed to be the episode in which they finally started moving, like I said, conclusory episodes, right? These were supposed to be episodes that were tying up loose threads. So this was supposed to be Twilight overcoming her anxiety issues and overcoming her panic attacks and freakouts, and ergo, this was going to be the end of that particular arc, getting over her stress problems. Obviously, we'll see that going forward. But ignoring that was the general idea here. But ignoring the relevance to the character, I do think that's the big Aesop. Pause. It is, I already said this earlier, it is such an invaluable thing to pause before you start processing what's happening, before you start dealing with whatever's going on. How many incidents in human history, even on just a personal level, would have gone better if people had just paused for a second and let their brain take over? I've said this before. Your brain literally, chemically does not work right when you are very angry. Just, it's a thing. So the idea of pausing and letting your brain re-engage is such a big deal. And the fact that so that's the big Aesop right there, pause. I do like the fact that she isn't worried. It's a great scene. Shikor mentions it there. There's the scene where she's like, I'm not worried. Pause. I'm not worried. Like, it was just such a revelation that she wasn't stressing out over this. That's actually all I got. This is a surprisingly good episode despite the audio glitch and, the stupid premise. And I enjoyed it more than I thought I would. I'm thinking I'm going to give this one a yellow. I'm not sure which. Yes, everything I do is a review now. What? I like reviewing things, for my sake, even if for nobody else. As I've said before, even if I, won $1 million, I'd still want to finish the review series just because I want to review everything. In between making my own stuff, obviously, and employing Low Reloaded to take over CBS. Low Reloaded, you are now in charge of Star Trek. Congratulations. I bought Star Trek. There you go. Throw me a nod and, give me a cameo, an episode or something. I don't know. I got other stuff to do. Yeah, I think I'm going to go with yellow. Yes, I do, Darth Tyron. It goes from blue, which is crap, to green, which is below average, to yellow, which is enjoyable, to orange, which is good, to red, which is great, and to purple, which is top tier. It's actually the exact same color system I use for most things in my life, hence the website, actually. And I actually have it organized by author and by in order, basically. So, like, for example, I can tell you right now that the first episode M.A. Larson did was Swarm of the Century, Season 1, Episode 10. Whereas Amy Keating Rogers' first episode was Season 1, Episode 3, Ticketmaster. The person who wrote this episode was Dave Polsky, whose first episode was Season 1, Episode 15. Dave Polsky also wrote my least favorite episode so far, Over a Barrel. So, go figure. And just while we're here, the person who has written the most episodes is actually a three-way tie, as of this moment in time, between Megan McCarthy, Amy Keating Rogers, and M.A. Larson. The person who's written the least number of episodes is Lauren Faust, which will probably always be true. I think Spike at Your Service is a Polsky episode. I'm not sure. I haven't looked it up because I will look it up as we go. Anyways. The Treant Monk. What the heck is Treant Monk? I'm going to chop off the local recording.